everyone. My name is Heather Dubois-Bournon, and I am the Executive Director of Wisconsin Public Education Network. We are a statewide coalition bringing together people who care about what's happening to our kids in their public schools. So thank you for joining us this morning and giving us this opportunity to speak on behalf of all of our children and all of those who can't be here today and who couldn't be here to testify on the state budget in person because they're at school. Our kids, our teachers, and all of the school leaders who work so hard to make sure that our kids have what they need every day. The people who you see before you today have driven from as far as Milwaukee and La Crosse and parts unknown. I see folks from rural and urban districts, school board members, elected officials, parents, teachers, and concerned citizens, people who have taken time to testify already on the state budget, and people who have attended every public hearing that we have had opportunity to speak up on school funding. We attended every hearing of the Blue Ribbon Commission on school funding. We attended every hearing on the state budget. And we heard the same thing from people like this again and again and again and again. Our schools do not have the resources they need to meet the needs of every learner. We had a budget on the table when we began this process that started the path toward meeting those needs and responded directly to the concerns that we heard at these hearings. We saw the overlap between the governor's proposed budget and the recommendations that were put forward by that Blue Ribbon Commission. People spoke in favor of those provisions again and again and again and again. And now we're being told that that budget is in the garbage can, that $900 million of those proposed aids are off the table. Nearly $1 billion of critically needed funds has been stolen from our kids, and we're being asked to cheer for that. Today, the parents, board members, and teachers you see here today are ready to bear witness to the decision that the Joint Finance Committee is going to make and the proposal that they're going to send forward to the other members of the legislature. We are here because we know what our kids need, and we know that they know what our kids need. And we are calling on them to make an investment in closing and not further widening the gaps that they have created through past budget decisions. Our speakers today are going to address these concerns. We have Carrie Matovilov, a Madison teacher. After Carrie, we will hear from John Coughlin, member of the Stoughton School Board, and then we will hear from Martha Saravo, a Madison parent. I'll close this event with some closing remarks, and I thank everyone for taking time to share their budget concerns with us today. So, Carrie.
Good morning. My name is Carrie Matovilov, a career educator here in Madison. And I, like teachers all across Wisconsin, am dedicated to our students. One of my top concerns is to ensure stability in our public schools for all students. That is why I'm here to support the legislator's own Blue Ribbon Commission proposed common sense solutions to teacher shortages and the many other pressing problems in our public schools. Yesterday, I heard from some lawmakers that we may have some common ground, more resources for public schools, more supports for our most vulnerable students, and more understanding about the stress the school districts are under. When it comes to broken schools in the funding system, I had a glimmer of hope yesterday. However, our students need more than per pupil increases that barely keep up with inflation. They need more support for special education. My students need resources for mental health and transportation to and from their schools. They deserve the best that our state can offer. So today, when final details of the public education budget are unveiled, it is my deep hope and the hope of all your dedicated teachers across the state of Wisconsin in their classrooms working right now, that the Joint Finance Committee moves on the common sense vision and truly supports our public schools. The hearts of our communities and the door-to opportunities for nearly 1 million Wisconsin children live in our schools every day. Students depend on their families and teachers, and families and teachers are depending on our legislators to do the right thing. Please support the funding for public education.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Jonathan Coughlin, and I am the treasurer of the Stoughton Area School District Board of Education. And the 2 minutes that I have allotted to me is not a lot of time to talk about school district budgets. So I'm only going to mention some of our most important numbers because I think numbers are really important today. In 2014, our constituents in Stoughton voted to approve a recurring operational referendum. This referendum has allowed us to maintain our programs and services without suffering many major cuts. And we are fortunate in Stoughton to have a community who both believe in and demand quality public education for their children. Now, this school year, our operating referendum contributes $7 million of our $43 million budget. If our referendum funding disappeared tomorrow, we would lose 16% of our budget. And considering that 3/4 of our budget goes directly to staffing, that means we would immediately have to fire at least 10% of our staff. This is a terrifying and an unacceptable reality for a public school district. We support Governor Evers' proposal to raise revenue limits because in Stoughton, we cannot even maintain our services with the revenue limit currently mandated by the state. Stoughton is considered by the state of Wisconsin to be a property-rich school district. So if Stoughton is struggling to maintain our services, how are our vulnerable school districts coping? Our rural communities, our economically depressed communities, communities whose residents probably can't afford an extra $7 million per year to maintain their services. Our legislators must rewrite our funding formula to better incorporate poverty, and we must increase state aid to ensure poor districts have at least the same opportunity as Stoughton, which for the last several years has been the luxury of not increasing the services that we're able to offer to our kids, but just maintaining the services that our school district can offer to our kids. So as a citizen, as a father, as a spouse of a brilliant high school teacher, and as the treasurer of the Stoughton Board of Education, I am pleading with our legislators to grant Wisconsin communities the autonomy to provide our children with the great education that our state constitution insists is their right to receive. If Stoughton is struggling, all of Wisconsin must be struggling. So thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak this morning.
Hi, thank you for letting me talk today. I'd like to start with a quote that inspires me every day from the National Inclusion Project. This inclusion is not simply about physical proximity. It is about intentionally planning for the success of all students. Having our special education programs integrated into our public schools can be one of the greatest experiences that a student can have. My daughter has mild to moderate cerebral palsy, and she has a special education team that's absolutely amazing. And I wish that all families could say the exact same thing every year. My daughter is able to participate with her peers because of her team. She's able to learn from her peers by being in the same classroom as they are, and vice versa. Her peers see beyond her disability, and they love her for everything that makes her truly unique. Embracing our differences, especially at such a young age, allows us to be more confident in our own individuality and stronger as a society. Inclusive classrooms benefit all students. Unbeknownst to my daughter, my experience as a parent within Madison School District has made my life a constant flux of appreciation and frustration, and I see how an IEP supports a student's ability to succeed in the classroom. I've seen the joy that the therapists, teachers, and support staff share with everyone around them every day. And I've also learned that a parent's role in the IEP team can be as scary and an overwhelming when you're sitting at a table with 10 staff surrounding you. But this is also a moment where a parent has the opportunity to shine through their advocacy, and I applaud all parents who do the same. But I never forget the daily struggle that our schools face every day, which can be helped by raising our special education reimbursement rate to 60%. Currently, the 24% reimbursement forces districts to spend $1 billion a year on unreimbursed special education costs. Keeping Governor Evers' proposals in the budget in about 2 years' time could provide $606 million to our schools who have had to make difficult decisions about how they are required by law to provide services to students with disabilities. Funding has not changed for 10 years, but our commitment to meet the needs of all of our students increases every day. My story is one of hundreds and more likely thousands of people who came to testify at a Joint Finance Committee hearing on behalf of our public schools and all of our wonderful students. So I'm saying to our legislators, do not forget us, include us, and help us. Thank you.
We heard yesterday that the Assembly Republicans intend to raise the special education reimbursement rate by a measly 3%. Districts all over the state have passed resolutions calling for a 90% reimbursement rate. Like Martha said, the state currently absorbs a $1 billion a year funding gap in actual special education costs that the Evers budget didn't even get halfway to filling. Why are we investing so little in the kids who need the most? It's time to change that. We have seen what the most powerful committee in the state, Joint Finance, does to our kids in past budget. We have watched them year after year put a plan on the table in the dark of night and pass it on party lines with no opportunity for public input or to weigh in on critical issues. This is how that committee has passed every bit of voucher legislation that we've seen in this state. This is how we have been iced out of the political process. And we're here today to say we are watching and we are going to follow up with our legislators no matter what happens today and make sure that the budget that's passed is a budget that works for our kids. We're not above begging. We have been on our knees begging for our kids for the past 10 years. Well, we're sick of begging for crumbs, and we're here to demand more than that this time around. We're here to demand a budget that works for every kid in every public school in the state and starts to do the slow, hard, expensive work of closing the gaps that the state has created through an inequitable funding structure that creates haves and have-nots all over the state, everywhere we look, within and across our districts. We call on the members of the Joint Finance Committee and all legislators who get whatever budget this committee puts forward to cast their votes for a budget that does meet the needs of all learners. The immediate, desperate needs of our schools that have been exposed again and again at the public hearings these folks have attended. We call on all who have conscience, all who have been listening, all who take seriously the state's moral and constitutional obligation to serve all students, to vote for a budget that works, and to fight as hard as we are fighting for the kids who are depending on their decisions. We've got 860,000 kids in our public school counting on them to do the right thing. Let's do it, Wisconsin. If you're watching this and you agree, please call on your lawmakers to do the right thing when they vote to send a budget to Governor Evers' desk. And please call on Governor Evers to veto a budget that does not meet the needs of our students if that's what they deliver him. Thank you for your time today. We'll be available after for questions.
Can I ask a question? The governor proposed $1.4 billion. Republicans are at $500 million. Are you saying that Evers should accept nothing less than $1.4 billion? Is there any number that you guys would accept that's different than that?
I don't know what the governor's line in the sand is. All I know is that the governor's budget was a first step toward fairness, the fairness that our kids deserve and that we've demanded all these years. And if we can't take that first step, when are we going to take it? All this budget does is invest in maintaining a status quo that creates inequities. How long are we going to invest in being last in special education funding? How long are we going to invest in being last in English language learner funding? The governor's budget proposal, for example, for mental health aides was exactly enough to cover the amount of people who applied the first time and didn't get funding because the pot was too small. And now we're told that pot was cut by, I think, like over half yesterday. Why? What is going on here? Why are the decisions we're making decisions that constantly keep our kids in the dark? It's time for that to change. We need to invest in the priorities our kids deserve, which is their success.
You mentioned the possibility of vetoing the budget if it's inadequate in your view. Senator Luther Olson today said that the governor would be ill-advised to do that because the subsequent budget could be even more. What would you say to that?
I don't know what to say to that. Why? It shouldn't be incumbent on parents to be begging for people to do the right thing for kids. We'd like all of our lawmakers to please be the grown-ups in this moment and work together to put a budget before the governor that will not be vetoed and that will meet the actual needs of our kids in schools, which are clear as crystal day to every member of this state legislature. It's unconscionable that parents should have to answer that question. That is a question that our lawmakers have forced us into a position of addressing, and that signals an intent for our children to be losers in this budget battle.
For people who don't know, can you guys talk to us about what that funding increase for special education would go toward?
You got two examples right here.
Yeah,
Examples right here.
it's simply a reimbursement of actual costs that districts have already spent in the previous year. And so it's money that districts are currently stealing out of their general funds to cover because they're not reimbursed by the state or federal government.
So yesterday, the Assembly said that they would put $50 billion toward it, and then this morning, both houses came out with a new plan that was $97 billion. Do you feel like that makes a difference?
School districts all over the state will tell you anything is better than what we have now, which is the worst in the nation for states that fund special ed like we do. So yes, of course, any aid is going to make a difference. But does it close the gap? No, it does not. I mean, are we serious about closing this $1 billion special education funding gap or not? If we're serious, let's bring that $1 billion back, right? Because that $1 billion was on the table and there was money to pay for it in the governor's original proposed budget. And we were told by members of Joint Finance on May 9 that all of those proposals were off the table and out of consideration. And yet, they did manage to preserve this component of our graphic, which is an allowance for a 90% reimbursement rate of special education costs above the cost of a special needs voucher. That seems patently unfair to most parents. Why? Why? Why are we doing this? It's time to put an end to the inequities, and it's time to give our kids what they need. Thank you for your time today, and we appreciate you joining us. Thank you to everyone who came out, and we will be following closely. You can follow us at WisconsinNetwork.org. Thank you.